Now we have with us Mr. Ray Neville, who is the Managing Director of Techstars India. Over 20 years as a growth and operations business leader, Ray has established a track record of success in identifying, shaping, and executing technology-led business concepts across the globe. Now I would like to invite Ray Neville, sir, onto the stage.
Moderating this session, we have Ms. Rishita Shah. She has been a Femina cover model and Veed Diva 2014. She has experience of hosting a diverse spectrum of shows as anchor and MC. Without any further ado, over to you, ma'am.
Such is the honor today that I get to share space with respectable professors, amazing entrepreneurs, and I'm not going to say students, I'm going to say future entrepreneurs. So I believe a lot of you sitting over here are going to be future entrepreneurs, and we're going to start the panel with Mr. Vivek Prakash and Mr. Ray. Sound, can I please have a mic that... Yes, thank you so much. All right. Let's hear it for the gentleman over here. Round of applause, please. You're all young. This is the East Summit 2019. I want to feel some energy in the air. Thank you. Okay, so I have some very interesting questions. I know the next 3 days are going to be all about entrepreneurship, technology, sharing ideas, sharing concepts, sharing all your design thinking, brainstorming efforts. So I know it's going to be really exciting, but right now is the time to learn from some experience that these guys have. And we want to try and understand that when you guys started off as entrepreneurs, what was the inspiration? What clicked in you that told you that this is the time we should now begin? It's time to start something new. It's time to add value. What brought that?
Sure. So my name's Ray. I grew up in Toronto, and my first time coming to India was in 2010. And you know, I always wanted to build a startup, but I didn't do it until after I had spent 10 years in corporate. So I was early employee at DoubleClick, which became Google, early at MSN, and then Yahoo. I was vice president, and completely bored, and wanted to have an impact, and wanted to, you know, go out and be my own boss, as they say. And I had always toyed with the idea of going out and doing a startup, and found certain problems that were just way beyond me to solve. And I think after 10 years, I felt, okay, now's the time. I really need to embark on this journey at this point. I wanted an adventure. And for me, you know, I wanted a big problem. It couldn't be small, it had to be massive. And I had, in 2007, when I left Yahoo, the internet was only 1 billion people. And I wanted to bring the next billion online. I know we hear it a lot, the next billion. I wanted to bring the next billion online. And I thought the next billion, you know, so in 2007, when I left Yahoo, it was just, you know, a couple of years before that, YouTube got bought by Google. I was doing a lot of video stuff for Yahoo. And I was like, you know, the next billion people are going to probably come online for a very different reason than the first billion. And I thought they'd come online, A, on feature phones, and B, for the type of content they'd been starved of. And so that, to me, was video content. And I went out, and I'm not I'm not a coder, I'm a business guy, but I can acquire companies. I do deals, that's my thing. And I went and I acquired a company, restructured the debt of the company, and built a whole vision around the company to take them to emerging markets and use their platform to bring a lot of great content to people who couldn't get it otherwise. And so that's what brought me to India in 2010. But that, yeah, I wanted to solve a massive problem. That was a big thing for me.
That's very amazing, and you're very right that the next billion internet had reached India, I think, but it had not seeped into the rural parts or the deeper India, the real India. And I think they came to internet for a very different reason, and the value they bring and the kind of content we can give them is going to be very different than the first users. You tell me a little about yourself and what clicked in you.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Vivek and I'm co-founder of a company, HackerEarth. I want to give a very brief introduction of that, but I want to ask from you guys, how many of you have ever written code in your life? Maybe a raise of hands. Okay. Now out of probably those who raised your hands, how many of you have heard of HackerEarth? Or you used HackerEarth? Okay, that's pretty encouraging. So I started HackerEarth, just after college. Didn't work anywhere. I had interned at Amazon. Did some Google Summer of Code stuff when I was in college. Was studying computer science, and the idea was, primarily from the day one, how can we create a level playing field? How can we create a meritocratic platform? How can we provide opportunities to developers irrespective of which college they are from, irrespective of whether they have studied computer science or not? How can we help them assess themselves and get access to the companies who could be open to hiring them? So primarily that was the goal from the day one. But besides that, there were a lot of macro factors that we were fortunate enough to be aware of when I was in college. The biggest macro factor has been that the software is eating the world. Every company is going to be a tech company in the future, or it is already a tech company. No one could imagine even booking a cab or ordering your meal on your phone a decade ago. In fact, when I was in college, I still did not have a Facebook account. I did not have a WhatsApp account, right? So a lot of things happened in the last, I would say 6-7 years. Every company is going to need developers. The number of developers itself is increasing at a very rapid pace. And in fact, I personally advise everyone to take up writing code as a profession. At least there's a huge demand for that. But going back to the college. The starting up was impulsive, just after that, I probably was one of the only guys, to basically start up after college. But given that the macro factor was there, given that, we were already motivated, I basically, just started with a batchmate who was working at Google for 2 months, left a job, and I know of zero, person in my life who have left a job at Google, in just 2 months. So it was a bit impulsive decision, but we just wanted to do it, and there was never a plan B. We just wanted to see how it goes.
Amazing. There was never a plan B. That's the best inspiration. There's nothing to fall on. I have to make this work. It's do or die. There's nowhere else to go, right? That's the core of entrepreneurial spirit. I feel like that keeps us going. Like there is only plan A. Now, one more thing I want to ask you, and I want the students here, the future entrepreneurs, to know, is what kind of resources you guys had that helped you, especially from the government of India, being in a society like ours. What are the resources that helped you? What worked best for you? What would you recommend they go to?
Well, I mean, I am a PhD in doing things the hard way. So I did a couple of things that were very different that most hadn't done at that time. One was I tried to start a business out of Toronto that focused on emerging markets, or India specifically. So that was one challenge. Secondly, I mean, neither the Toronto startup ecosystem or the India kind of national ecosystem had really developed. in that time, in 2007 to 2010. So that was very early days, right? And then I also timed my startup, during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So, so it was pretty hard.
So this was the time when the Western countries were having a financial crisis.
That's
a lot
right.
of people were getting kicked out of their jobs. There was a recession that hit the market. And starting up at that time was a big gamble, right?
We ill-advised. But I really wanted to do this. And I'll be honest with you, it was really tough. And I was essentially a solo founder, because I didn't really, I had people who came along in the journey for part of the time, but we were struggling. And one of the things I learned, you learn a lot of lessons when you're building a company. One of the things I learned is that, you have everyone who works with you for a period of time. You don't have them forever. And, you have to get as far as you can and build a momentum, or you lose people. And it was so tough, so I kept pushing forward, but we had no momentum. And I kept losing people. And so it was really lonely building a startup that way at that time. And by the way, I had started with practically, no savings, nothing. I kind of was restarting my life at this point. And it was really tough.
I'm sure. I read a case study which talked about people who started out at that time. They said that it was so tough to find money and people who are going to invest into new ideas and concepts. But what was amazing was, because of the recession, a lot of prices had dropped. So if you're starting an office, the real estate prices were down. Staff was easily available because people were getting kicked out of their jobs. So it takes, I think, a special kind of person to see an opportunity.
A stubborn person. An entrepreneur.
I like to call it motivated, like really motivated person to find an opportunity in a challenge like that. So amazing that you did that. Now I want to know from you, what resources you had?
So I definitely needed a lot of help, when I decided to start up. It was October of 2012 when, I moved to Bangalore. Literally I had like about 10,000 rupees in my bank account, a 13-inch laptop, and just moved to Bangalore with that. I was and I am today a hardcore, programmer, a hardcore engineer, and it was probably, just the passion which, just transported me from Roorkee to Bangalore. I took a train from, Delhi to basically get there. And I definitely needed a lot of help and a lot of resources when starting up. Otherwise, HackerEarth would not be what it is today. First of all, for example, there were no accelerator. There were actually literally just 2 accelerator programs in the country at that time. Today there are like dozens, maybe just in Bangalore. And was very lucky that Rajesh Sawhney, who started GSF Accelerator, he just saw me and Sachin, and we had no product. We just had an idea. We sold what we could do, what we had done earlier.
Just shooting in the dark.
Yes, and he kind of accepted us in that accelerator program. Again, he facilitated, the first round of fund, which was about $100,000 that we got a few months later. So very, again, lucky and fortunate to have that. At the same time, got a lot of support, from the Angel Network in Bangalore. Like, for example, Naveen Tiwari from InMobi, Mohit Saxena from InMobi, founders of Canvera, which was a company in the photo space at that time. A lot of different founders, helped us out, provided the mentorship, asked us some very hard questions that why we were doing so, what we wanted to build, how we would monetize, because frankly, we were not thinking of how we would monetize at that point in time. It was just about building a product, putting it out in front of the developers and seeing what kind of responses we would get. At the same time, we got a good amount of support from NASCOM, even from iSpirit, and Ravi, Gururaj, who has been with NASCOM, he helped us with some contacts. NASCOM, in fact, started running some hackathons on HackerEarth, and still runs hackathons on HackerEarth, which is, again, where thousands of developers participate in those. So we got a lot of support, a lot of resources, whether it was in terms of the fund, whether it was in for mentorship, whether it was, for connecting, whether for getting some of the early customers. None of it would have been possible without the support that we got. And I think that would be true for every startup.
That's very true. And one of the things I've studied entrepreneurship in United States, and we were taught was start networking and speaking to people. I was a bit of an introvert at that time, but they told me the more people you speak with, the more dynamics you understand, and the more dynamics you understand, the better teams you can lead. That led me to so many different perceptions, so many different understandings of what my customer would want or what my client would pay for a certain thing, and so on and so forth. That was going to be my next question. Tell me a little more about prototyping. Because what happens is, we have an idea. This idea is on paper. How do we bring it to life? What did you do that sort of helped cultivate it to life?
Well, the on paper part is great. I think the inclination is to build to perfection. And one of the things, I run an accelerator called Techstars, one of the many, but one of the few that have worked with 2,000 companies. And we try to get people out of their head as quickly as possible. One of the things we really that I believe, is you need to develop an empathy for your customer. But you're not going to develop an empathy for your customer unless you talk to enough of them, right? So you have to get out of your head. And the problem is, many of us who are entrepreneurs, I think it's almost a character trait where we're not social, funny enough. It's hard for us to socialize our ideas. It's even hard for us to articulate our ideas. So getting out of your head, talking about it, having conversations with potential customers, getting something they can test and play with, however crude it is, allows you to develop an empathy for your customer, a stronger empathy for your customer. And that's how, my favorite quote, I know it's overused these days, but the Henry Ford quote, if I'd asked my customers what they would have wanted, they would have said a faster horse. You had to really understand your customers to know that they didn't actually want a faster horse, they wanted a car, but they didn't know a car existed, right?
That is actually something I go by as well. Now, I'm sure you guys are going to get introduced to the concept of design thinking in the days to come. So what design thinking does is, let's say the problem is, I need a new sink. How about I change the question to, how can we make cleaning hands easier? Then you have a sanitizer, then you have hand wipes. The thing is, product differentiation starts when you try to think outside that box, when you break that box and you try and change the question. Why can we make this easier? Why can we make this simpler? Why can we make this more accessible? Once you do that, money will follow. Tell us a little more about what you did. How was prototyping working for you? Did you take customer feedback? Did you change too much?
Yes, so very good question. Specifically in our space where a product is primarily used by developers and for developer assessment and recruiting, how we went about it. And one of the primary problems that we were solving, when we were starting up, was how do we make it easier to write code online and get an instant feedback in real time online. Back in 2012. Still the idea of running code in the cloud was very, very new. Running anything in the cloud in India was kind of, growing up, and forget running code in the cloud. The concept of that you don't have to, and all programmers and engineers would understand this, the concept that you don't have to install compilers or IDEs or code editors on your local machine, and you just log into a browser and you start writing code and you compete with, hundreds of thousands of developers all over the world. You get a feedback in real time, irrespective of the programming language that you write in. That was unheard of. So what we went about doing was rolling out, we basically focused on just two parameters. And the first was, how can we make a code editor as simple as possible, which runs and loads very fast in the browser? And the second is, the moment you write your code and hit submit, how do we get a response, overall, code evaluation response, which is as close to what you'd get on your basically local machine, and probably even faster if your local machine basically just hangs and crashes, right? How can we do it even faster on the browser? And we just focused on these two parameters, and we saw that developers instantly loved it. Obviously, we went down so many times. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, trying to reboot our entire cluster, reboot the entire system. So many sleepless nights, but that was the core basically experience that we wanted to build. And that actually, what the reason I'm explaining this in detail is, whatever product you build, there would be at least 1 or 2 core areas of the product where you want the experience to be really amazing, because that is what your users are using the product for, your customers are using the product for, and those operational metrics for at least those experiences have to be really amazing. And then everything else basically just falls, and everything else has to be just glued around it. Yeah.
That is a very, very amazing thing that you said, that take feedback real time. Otherwise, you can have like a 5-star product and you may realize later that nobody wants to use it. The best thing is to take feedback real time, keep changing it. That way you're on the same page as your customer and everything's going great. All right, now let's talk money, investments. How easy were they?
Okay, let me go on it. Actually, we actually had the first round of fund that we got, which was about $100,000, was pretty easy. I would say, because I would say we were lucky to get that when we had just had a basic product and maybe about 40-50,000 users, But after that, we raised 2 rounds, actually 3 rounds. There was a pre-Series A, Series A, and then Series B. And all the rounds have been extremely hard. There won't be any, at least any investor in the country that I have not met, so far. And that happens when you have a product probably, which is focused on a niche vertical, when you are trying to solve the problem a bit differently. But again, every time we have been lucky enough to that even after getting 50 no's or hundreds of no's, there have been one person who has understood the business, who has understood us, who has understood what we are trying to do really well, and then put in the money. So we raised about $500,000 in 2014. Then we raised $5 million in 2016, and then we actually recently closed about $7 million. So if you ask me personally, the experience has been, I would say, brutal. Meeting, everyone, not giving up, raising the money, raising the capital that we needed, not what someone was offering or not what someone we just wanted, but raising what we really, really needed, and doing the math and doing the science behind that, and then going about and then meeting everyone.
How would you value your company while taking investments? What is the thought process behind that?
Can you probably try to explain the question?
Okay, so let's assume I create a product. I don't know what it's worth. I don't know what my company is worth right now. So how do I pitch to an investor to show some value, to show some worth? How do I decide what my idea or concept is worth?
So I've written a little bit about this recently. If anyone adds me on LinkedIn, you'll find some stuff on this. But so I boil it down to signals. So when you're building a company in the early days, there's a complete absence of data on, how well you're doing at solving the problem. There's absolutely no data, right? So early stage investors don't invest on, on that basis of performance. They invest on the basis of potential. And they decipher potential based on signal. If you understand the signals that you need to be a beacon for, that you need to emit, you can go out and raise money early stage. That's going to get you as far as Series A, potentially, but not far beyond that. Because at some point, venture capital works on the basis of data, right? Late stage venture capital has performance data. So they start to make decisions differently, they use different signals. You're all sitting here, you're all going to IIT. That's a signal, right? So right off the bat, when any of you actually go out and pitch an angel investor or a VC, they're probably going to pay attention to you, right? You know, when you have already been a founder, when you've started a company, even if that company has failed, that's another signal. If you've obviously if you've built a company and had success, that's a really great signal. But going beyond that, when you can get to really explaining what you've built without using jargon, right? Without using terms like IoT and AI and all that kind of stuff that's very easy to sprinkle in and it sounds cool and it sounds very current. In actuality, when you use those words, what you're saying to the investor is, I'm really not sure how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to use this term as a catch-all phrase. These are signals, right? Being able to explain your idea, going back to the point you just made earlier, getting the ability to actually speak to customer feedback, people you've spoken to, the anecdotes of those conversations, being qualitative about what you've heard. Those are signals, right? So what you want to do if you're going to go out and build a startup is figure out how to create the right signals. And you already have a step up because you're coming from IIT, so that helps, right? But you've got to figure out how to create the right signals. So I would encourage you to really dig deep on that. And again, the right signal, the reason they're signals is because there's usually some likelihood that when you find those signals, they're going to lead to successful outcomes, right? And that's how VC works.
That's amazing. Which brings me back to the point of data. Data is the new oil, they say. And you can now read patterns and you can make decisions that are not just coming out of thin air or a hunch of some sort, but is actually backed by some pattern of some sort. You recognize that and implement decisions. Has data helped you in terms of innovation in any way? Do your companies use data to innovate products, product options?
Yeah, all the time, like for example, so the question is basically, if you have data, how it helps
How do you implement?
To innovate. In the early days, it's a chicken and egg problem, to be honest. You need data to take better decisions, and you want to take better decisions, but you don't have data. So in the early days, you are relying a lot on your gut, a lot on your instincts that what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. In fact, forget everything. Having an idea is just a gut feeling, right? Having an idea and then wanting to start up is basically your instinct saying that, okay, that it can be a risky proposition, but still you want to go ahead and you want to put your life or put your money into basically executing that idea. So in the early days it is all about that, but as you get users, as you get customers, you start accumulating data. If I talk in context of specifically in context of HackerEarth, we for example have a skill graph of all the developers, all the users on HackerEarth. We know what are the programming languages they are good in, what are the projects they have done, what's the kind of experiences they have had, which are the companies they could be suitable for. For the companies when they are using HackerEarth to do all these campus tests and assess developers and candidates for different roles. Now we are able to better recommend who would be the best suited for interviewing, who would be the best suited for hiring. So there are a lot of intelligence and a lot of I would say actually a very core machine learning specific stuff that we are adding into the product, but that is all based on data. Now this kind of innovation could not have happened even if we had thought of doing such innovation back in 2012. Yeah, right. If we did not have the data, only because we were able to build a platform and then get the developers, get the community, get the customers. Now we are able to add intelligence on top of it.
All right, that's amazing. Experience brings in more experience. All right. The other question I had for y'all is, when students are trying to start up or they're trying to think of an idea, they're trying to solve a problem, there are some industries which are high barrier industries. Then there are some that are low barrier industries. Is there a preference? Would you recommend, like, let me assume I know my first startup is going to be a failure. Where should I try the waters? Should I try a high barrier industry? Should I try a low barrier industry?
Go get a job. Like,
Yeah.
seriously. If you're struggling to find an idea, don't go build a business. Go get a job. Go get some experience. Go get some depth of knowledge. The high barrier businesses you're talking about, they're high barrier because, like, fintechs as an example are high barrier businesses. A lot of medtechs are high barrier businesses because they require some domain experience, some knowledge, because they're not just, you're not just gonna go and code one night and solve a major problem, for fintechs or for insurance companies. You need some experience.
Right.
So if that's what interests you, go get to know that area, go get a job, right? I think there's a lot to be said. We've made this flip where all of a sudden it's really awesome to go build a company, and that's great. I think a lot of people are losing sight of what building a company is really about. And building a company is just one way to solve a problem. You can go and join a great company and also solve a problem. In fact, I would say that's a much easier thing to do. Go get a job for a company if you think a company is solving a problem that means something to you, then why go start another company to solve that problem, right? But the experience you'll get by going out and working with a good team of people and solving a problem, look, very few people go right out of the bat and succeed right out of school. So, that would be my advice.
That's actually very good advice. Get a job, fail under somebody's mentorship so that they can correct you, and then you know better when you try to implement your own business. That's amazing. Okay, any questions from the crowd? Any specific questions for our amazing guiding lights over here today?
I know it has been probably a long session for you guys. I actually have one question. How many of you want to start up ever in your life? Probably a raise of hands. Yeah? Why not everyone, right? Everybody said that.
Why are you here, not at the pub then?
Everybody in all the keynotes said that starting up makes you actually makes your resume better, even if you are trying to get into a job, irrespective of whether you succeed or fail. And I strongly recommend everyone to do it, irrespective of whenever you do it, either after college or you work somewhere and then you start up, but you must do it. The amount of learning you get is something you can't even comprehend unless you start up.
That's amazing, amazing. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. It's a rare opportunity to have people share their knowledge, share their experience, and it's even more amazing if you learn from it and apply it. I really hope we have 10 amazing entrepreneurs coming out of here next year. Yes, you have a question?
Hello.
Hello, sir. As you said, get a job. I want to ask that I'm an engineering student, so of course I get into internships every year, like was many people here. So I was asking how to network with people, how to build their network, because when the once question was asked here that it has been 7-8 months for his startups, but he has not been able to get the proper investors. So at many stages of your startup, you might have been a problem where you don't have enough network to solve that particular problem. So I was asking like if you have any advice for any, like if you go to an internship or something, so how can we how to gain the network with people?
So the question is, so the issue is, it's tough to find the right network of people that are going to invest in your idea. Is that the challenge?
Sir, I'm asking that.
Or how do you build a network?
Yeah.
How do you build a network?
Yeah.
Got it. So, look, I think let's go back to what networks are, right? Do you know, in terms of engagement, one of the highest engaged networks that you can ever find is the people who went to the same post-secondary school. Did you know that? If you reach out to anyone who's an IIT Kanpur alum on LinkedIn, there's about a 1 in 4 chance that they're actually going to respond to you. Did you know that? 1 in 4. Your family is 80%, right? But your alum, that's 1 in 4. It doesn't matter when they went to school here. So it's not just your year we're talking about, right? So that's one amazing asset you have. I think that's a big asset for going to a specific school. But you can build on that. It's easier than ever to find people, online. What you need is to figure out, how to articulate and how to connect and how to feel, good about connecting. And sometimes building a connection with someone is about, sometimes putting yourself in a place of discomfort. I wasn't always a good speaker. I stammered when I was a kid. I left university. I was pretty, shy, right? For me, I had to really get out of, myself. I had to put myself out there, and that was not comfortable. But one of the things I learned was, when you put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you grow, right? And that's what this is all about.
Thank you, sir.
That is very true. The more you try to socialize, if it's difficult to speak to an investor at first, try speaking to a friend. Try speaking to someone who's a stranger. Just go and be like, hey, I have an idea. When I say stranger, I mean on campus. Just go and be like, I have an idea. Can you tell me how you feel about this? Or what would you do? Would you use something like this? Do you think you'd be interested? Would you pay for it? Start with some basic questions. And if they don't feel it, okay, there'll be another audience for it. That's fine. Okay? And
hello. Yeah, this is working. I actually want to add a couple of things to it, and this is general advice that I give today. Specifically, in colleges, and the fact that all of you are here, even till now, I want to tell this to you specifically, is the one thing that ideas are basically worth a dime, and what happens in colleges is we get too productive of the ideas that we have, right? We think that if we share, someone else is going to steal them. All of us may have seen the movie Social Network by now, and we think that probably there is someone else who is going to steal my idea. But that does not happen. That never happens. You have to go and talk about your ideas to maybe 20 of your batchmates, and maybe one of them would actually accept that idea as his or her own idea and would become your co-founder, when you are starting the company. And college is a perfect place to find a good friend to start a company with. The perfect place. There cannot be a better place than this to, basically find someone to start a company. Roti, kapda and makan, everything is sorted here, right? When you are in college. And then what you have to then worry about is basically, whatever you want to do and whom you want to do it with, right? So try to do something when you are in college. Telling a bit of personal story, when I came to college and got computer science, and that was because of whatever rank I had never touched computer before in my life. Literally never touched computer before in my life. Started coding, started doing a bunch of stuff, and then basically ended up starting up HackerEarth, and that too with a friend whom we became friends in college, and we mutually thought that this was a great idea, this was a good idea to basically work upon. So a lot of things can only happen when you are in your college, when you are in your dorm room. But for that, you have to share your ideas with everyone. You have to do what you really like to do, what you really love to do. You have to try to become really good at it. And then you have everything else sorted out. The only thing that you have to then worry about is how do you go about building what you want to build. You have the mess, you have the breakfast, you have the dinner, you have the lunch waiting for you. You have the, basically the place to sleep. And then you have got all the time to then basically do what you love to do. And if you do that, you may fail, but you may also succeed. But you won't know unless you have tried it out. So that's probably the final advice I would give to you.
Wonderful advice. I think so. One thing to say is, if you have any interest in entrepreneurship, learn to take risks. Learn to not fear failure. Right? If anything, success is a function of lots and lots of failure.
Very true. Now, one last time, ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Rishita, for such a wonderful moderation. The Fireside with Founders has really brought out various facets and nuances of the startup ecosystem. We thank the panelists, Mr. Vivek Prakash and Mr.Ray Neville, for bringing out their personal experiences on table that will help us learn and understand this world better. I'm sure we'll all walk back richer with improved perspectives. Thank you, sirs.
And now I would like to call upon Saksham Gupta, Overall Coordinator of eCell IIT Kanpur, to present the token of appreciation to Ray Neville. Now I would like to call upon Ayush Sharma onto the stage for presenting a moment of appreciation for our moderator, Rishita. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
We would request Tanmay, Overall Coordinator of eCell, to kindly present a memento to Mr. Vivek Mishra.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Kya?
Close kar do.
With this, we have arrived at the culmination of the inauguration ceremony of eSummit. Thank you all for your presence, and we hope to see you in large numbers participating in the coming days. Thank you all.
Thank you.
यार हम लोग इतने स्टूपिड हैं, हम लोग को ये लाइट नहीं कवर करेगी.
Excuse me, everyone. Hello. Telugu नहीं रहा है.
Announcement, please.
Everyone who has not got the hospitality booklets, they need to first get them on the counter. Otherwise, they won't be able to attend the further sessions in the summit. Please do register. Get yourself registered there.